Hey man, you trying to make some Instagram bangers, man? You are? That's good, man. That's real good. You just came to the right YouTube channel.
Incidental, I be better by the summer, I be better by the winter, I be hopping in the rental, maybe does a love for Roma, Mr. Simpson in the Volvo, damn.
Anyways, my name's Ryan, and I hope to be making more of these videos where I help you guys out with photo and video kind of stuff. So definitely subscribe if you want tips and tricks and like how to get my sense of style. You can find me on Instagram at ryan.visuals to get my sense of style and hopefully enjoy some cool visuals. Anyways, what do I use to edit my pictures for Instagram or pictures in general? I use Lightroom. I'm sure you're not surprised, most people use Lightroom nowadays. Sometimes I'll use a bit of Photoshop in there, but most of my pictures go through Lightroom first, and I find that it does like most, if not everything I need it to do. So Lightroom. Anyways, let's just hop into Lightroom and get started. So these were taken on Hub Day 2. Shout out to H Collective. I'm gonna edit this picture of Nathalie. Her Instagram will be on the screen, so be a creep. Nah, don't be a creep, but give her more clout. And yeah, let's just get started. So you might notice, if you're a beginner, you might notice that I'm editing on a white background. I just like using white because my pictures are mostly seen on Instagram, so I get a better sense of how it's seen. I think default's like dark gray, so right click, white. So the first thing I always do is I go to camera neutral, and then I do lens corrections. The reason I do this is because I heard that this is the way I was just taught. There's this more colors to work with, better colors to work with, I think. And yeah. So before I get started, I just want to say like what I'm going for. I'm kind of going for like a warm kind of look, moody kind of look. Since this was taken in the daytime, there's like a lot of nature elements. I want it to be warmer. And yeah, let's just get started. So since I want it to be warmer, I'm gonna add some temperature in there, add some warmth. Just a little bit, because we can like always do other adjustments in the other panels, but yeah. So this picture is exposed pretty well, so I'm not gonna mess with the exposure. I am gonna decrease the highlights a little bit. As you can see, like it's blown out. You press J to see like what's blown out, what's completely white or completely black. Decrease a little bit. Yeah, there, that's good. Increase the shadows, compensate for that. Increase the whites a little bit so it's not like washed out. And decrease the blacks for like a moody kind of look. And it also applies to black as well, so the blue points are like completely black. I'm fine with like a few, you know, so decrease the highlights even more. Decrease the shadows even more. I think that's fine. So before and after so far, I think there's like a bit of more contrast in there, more detail in the dress. To do before and after, you just click the backslash key. It's under my backspace key on my keyboard, but it might be different for yours. So the next thing I do is, I think, add a little bit of clarity. Just a little bit. You don't want to overdo it. And then I think I'm going to decrease the vibrance and increase the saturation. So moving on to the tone curve, I always add these 3 points as most people do: shadows, midtones, highlights. Watch a video on like curves if you don't understand too much about it, but I will be going over it a little bit. I'm gonna fade the highlights a little bit so the sky's a little bit not like completely white, it's a little gray, so there's like separation from the Instagram background. And I'm gonna raise the blacks. You see how like washes the color out a bit, like adds kind of like a film kind of look. That's like really popular on Instagram. I'm gonna decrease the shadows, decrease the midtones a little bit, I think, and increase the highlights a little bit. Yeah, because I don't want to be blown out, but I do want to add some contrast in there. So yeah. So this like general S curve you see right here is what I use for a lot of my pictures. Not all of them, but a lot of people use this kind of curve. It adds like contrast, makes it add that film look, makes it a little bit more moody. Really popular on Instagram right now, and yeah. Just play around with it, but I find that I usually default to this. So moving on to the calibration, I've been liking the colors a lot when I decrease the hues of the blues lately. Not too much, because you can always like change it in the HSL, but yeah, that's what I've been doing lately. And moving on to the HSL, I think her skin tone's looking a little red, so I'm just gonna move that to the orange a little bit, and see, I'm gonna add some warmth into the greens, and I desaturate my greens because it's the background and I want separation from the model. And if you notice from my pictures, I don't really like greens that much, so I usually desaturate my greens. Let's see what yellow does. So her dress is yellow. I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth in there just to like complement her skin tone a little bit more, but I don't want to do too much. And I'll desaturate a little bit because some of the leaves, grass, whatever is considered yellow, and I don't want it to pop out. Also gonna increase the luminance of the skin tone, orange, just a little bit, so there's like separation, and I like kind of like glow on the model. And then I'll desaturate the skin tone a little bit. I think luminance can be there, and I think I'll increase the saturation of the reds just to add kind of like a blush, add some detail back into the lips. Yeah, I think that looks good. Skin tone looks good. And there's not a lot of aqua blues or purple magenta, so I'm not gonna mess with that. I'm gonna decrease the luminance of the reds to make it like a bit more moody. Decrease luminance for greens to create separation from the model. Decrease the luminance for the yellows too to add detail back in the dress and create separation from the model again. And then yeah, that looks good. So moving on to split toning. For daytime shots, I do orange. Actually, for most of my shots, I do orange in the highlights and blues in the shadows, but for daytime kind of shots, I like to increase the saturation a bit more than I normally would, and use blue in the shadows, and I'll decrease the shadows. The saturation of the shadows, I mean. So yeah, so before and after. Then I'm going to decrease the saturation of the highlights a little bit more. I'm going to increase it, the shadows a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good, I think. It's really subtle, but it does make your picture pop a little bit more. So like I said, when I'm doing daytime shots, I increase the saturation of the oranges a little bit more in the highlights and decrease the saturation of the blues in the shadows. In like nighttime shots, I'll do like increased saturation in the blues and the shadows and decreased saturation in the oranges and the highlights. This is my style. Sometimes I'll like use blues in the highlights and orange in the shadows. Like there's no set rule or anything, but usually you want these colors to be opposites, or you want them to be like colors that are dominant in your pictures. Just mess around with it, but usually I do orange in the highlights and blues in the shadows. So sharpening next. You click Alt, you hold down Alt, and then you drag this masking right here to see what you're sharpening. Add some sharpness in there, don't overdo it, and yeah, that looks good. So yeah, I'm actually pretty much done. I'm gonna do some individual adjustments real quick. I think like you can add kind of like a sun ray into this kind of picture, so I'm gonna do that with the gradual filter. Some contrast in there. I think that looks good. And then I'm gonna create even more separation from the model. I have like this preset that I made. It's called where is it? Background blur. And the radial filter is not inverted. And it decreases black, decreases clarity. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm just gonna dial these back a little bit. And yeah, it kind of adds like a dreamy look. Makes the trees like a bit more dreamy, not as clear, but you definitely still want like detail in your model, so you create a radial filter. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna mess with the eyes a little. I go to Iris Enhance. It's a default preset made by Adobe. Color in the iris a little bit. Then I go to teeth whitening. Oh shit. Do new brush, then teeth whitening, and then yeah, I color in the white parts of the eyes a little bit, and then I do a new brush again, and then I do clarity, sharpness, and then color in that a little bit. I say for the sake of this tutorial because the model is really far. Her eyes are really far from the camera, so you probably won't see it anyways, but for pictures where you're closer with your model, definitely play with the Iris Enhance with the eyes, like sharpen the eyes a little, add some clarity in there, because you want your audience to be drawn to the eyes. And yeah, that's pretty much done. Before, after. So yeah. So just to go over what I did, I first changed camera profile and lens calibration, lens corrections. Then I decreased the highlights, increased the shadows, increased the whites, decreased the blacks, which I normally do for all my pictures. Then I mess with the tone curve. I'd usually do an S, play with the calibration of the colors, and then mess with the HSL until I get the skin tone I want. I usually warm up the greens, desaturate the greens, and then orange the highlights, blues in the shadows, and then I'll do some sharpening, then individual adjustments, such as like the gradual filter to add some like sunlight, and a radial filter to create kind of like a dreamy look and separation from the model. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how I get kind of like a moody, dreamy kind of look for my Instagram pictures for a daytime kind of shot. I do plan on making more of these for like different kind of shots because my editing style varies, especially for like different kind of situations. So like I said, like the nighttime shots, I'll add more saturation in the blues and the shadows and decrease the oranges in the highlights. And yeah, I might do different kind of photos in the future, so definitely let me know what kind of photos you want to see me edit, what kind of style, and I'll get back
Down to the baby face, clothes on me, guess it's holiday. Fried no sides at the restaurant, my sleep schedule like the power here is never on. Feeling like the past year, whole